one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Not seeing anybody in the general audience, I'm going to skip over the comments from the public on agenda and non-agenda items. And then we'll move to presentations for the updated district-wide safety plan.
So Alicia is going to share with the board the updated safety plan. There's not much that's going to be very new from year to year. It's not really an additional piece either. There's an updated piece about the remote instruction piece of the safety plan. Yeah, so
it may be easier. I know the board's behind you. Do have a copy of the presentation at your board seat. So it may be easier just to take a look at that and then just flip the administrative team and our live video. So as we know, each year we're required to examine our district safety plan and make any updates necessary. It also requires that we post it for public comment for 30 days and that the board re-adopt the district-wide safety plan in time for us to submit it to the state by October 1st. So we're right on point with our timelines. I will say I'd like to thank the district-wide safety committee because back in June we did review this plan as a committee, and then subsequently we did make further updates and post it for public comment thanks to Lorraine Carpenter at the beginning of August. So we're meeting those deadlines prior to September 1st. So just to walk you through just the major components of the plan pretty quickly, I won't read through it all because you can see it on the screen and on your slides. Our district-wide safety plan is in compliance with Commissioner Regulation 155.17, as well as Education Law 2801A. It's also consistent with our more detailed, comprehensive, but also confidential building level emergency response plans. So as you can see, we are required to develop and maintain a district-wide safety plan, and it's really designed to prevent or minimize the effects of any type of serious violent incidences or emergencies, and also to facilitate the coordination with our local and county resources in the event that something does happen in our district. It's responsive to all the needs in the schools within our district. It also provides a plan for communicating with our parents, our staff, and our school community regarding our policies and procedures, and also in the event that if an incident should happen, which could also be any type of man-made disaster, not necessarily a violent situation, of how we communicate with our public as well. The plan is compliant with our Project SAVE, which is our Safe Schools Against Violence in Education law. And again, that is a comprehensive planning effort that addresses prevention, response, and recovery with respect to a variety of emergencies that may occur, hopefully not in our schools. This plan was originally adopted in 2001, so beyond that time, we were just required to reassess any changes or updates that we do make to this plan. So some of the major components, as you can see, we are required to identify a district-wide school safety team, and the board did approve that membership at the July annual org meeting. And we have our board member, we have Mr. Schrum on our committee as the board member. We have students, we have instructional staff, support staff, administrators, transportation, welcome Ms. Julia Berenger, community members, school safety personnel, as well as medical professionals. So beginning with our SRO is now on that safety team as well beginning this year. Risk reduction, prevention, and intervention strategies. That really includes how we schedule ongoing and annual trainings. We can perform tabletop exercises. We do a variety of emergency response drills. And we also test our emergency notification system. We do utilize our building level safety teams. Our principals do meet with them on an ongoing basis throughout the year for building specific discussions and plans. Our building principals, usually on opening day or one of the first faculty meetings, do review aspects of their school building level plans with their school safety team and with their faculty at each school. We also have some other resources. So a benefit of us being with our property liability insurance, Utica National. They have a very comprehensive safety program. There's all kinds of resources and trainings as being a client of theirs that we can access, many of which are free. In fact, our online safety training portal that we use each year to meet our mandates is actually through their program, and so that's free to us as a client. So all of our staff takes all of their mandated trainings each year through this portal when they return at the end of the month. This response includes notification and activation in response to an emergency or an incident, and also situational response protocols. I will let you know, under Project SAVE, all staff are required to receive annual trainings on emergency response, but that also includes not only violence prevention, but it also includes, there's 12 aspects of mental health categories that they also have to receive annual training on by regulation. And then recovery includes district support for buildings that have endured an emergency or disaster, and again, that includes mental health and crisis response teams. I will let you know this year, most of the updates just centered on Bob Kramer creating the Knox Middle School emergency response plan for that building, and then us just updating that information that was pertinent to the district-wide safety team, and just really making sure that our plans were updated based on the new grade level configurations. And so that was really the bulk of the changes, but I'll go through just very briefly some others. And of course, the biggest one that we saw during the COVID pandemic was the requirement to include continuity of operations in the event of a public health emergency. And that was effective as of April 2021. And we talked about this last year. And it really identifies the essential staff that are required to maintain operations in the district in a public health emergency situation that we've spent the last couple of years in. It identifies sufficient supplies like personal protective equipment, cleaning and disinfecting protocols. It also establishes the district's command center and various roles and responsibilities in response to a public health emergency. Also mitigating the spread of disease, and also a big piece that you're going to see at the end, one of the major changes this year was requiring a remote instruction plan, which really does focus on equity and access for our students in terms of internet access as well as access to technology. So digital equity is a big piece of this plan. And then planning for the continuity of learning is also a part of that remote instruction plan. So some recent laws and regulations, and some of these you saw last year. Alyssa's law required school districts to consider silent panic alarm systems when reviewing and amending district and school safety plans. We've had that embedded working with Mr. Wood and Mr. Harrop in our Smart Schools Bond project with panic alarms as part of our overall safety response system. So that is something that we're working on. Kerry's law is to ensure that anyone can reach a 911 call center. We do have a multi-line telephone system, so we have to make sure that someone can dial out to 911 in an emergency. And Ray Baum's Act is affiliated with that as well. The Snow Day pilot, this was passed by the Board of Regents this past September. They did write into code the flexibility to remain in session and provide instruction through remote learning and count these days towards our annual hours for our instructional requirement. So they did codify that as of September 2022. And then the emergency remote instruction plan, that became a requirement as of the last September's Board of Regents meeting to be effective with the 23-24 school year. It did adopt additions into 100.1 of Commissioner Regs, in case anyone's interested and would like to read the full length of that new regulation. And what it really says is that instruction can still be delivered through synchronous and asynchronous instruction. However, it must require regular and substantive teacher-student interaction with an appropriately certified teacher. So really, the asynchronous component is really supplemental to that asynchronous live instruction by a certified teacher. So you can see on the next slide just a little bit more detail in terms of the emergency remote instruction plan. It does take quite a bit up in our district-wide safety plan. It's actually pages 39 through 45, if anyone would like to read through it in more detail. But just as a summary, it truly is about access and equity across the board. There were 6 main components of this requirement that we had to respond to. A couple of them were ensuring computing devices are made available to students or other means by which students can participate in synchronous instruction. We had to ensure that students receiving remote instruction under emergency conditions would have access to interconnectivity. And I have to say, I think we've done a really nice job with that all the way through COVID. We did surveys, we know our families, we had hotspots available. We have a process still to this day of how parents can request a hotspot that we can provide, as well as we really are a one-to-one school district already. So some of these things have been in place for a couple of years now, but we really just had to solidify it as part of our emergency response plan. Again, we have to look at how the expectations of school staff for time spent in synchronous and asynchronous instruction of students on days of remote instruction under emergency conditions, and really that asynchronous instruction is supplementary to synchronous instruction. We had to describe how instruction will occur for students for whom remote instruction by digital technology is not available or appropriate. So I think I'm making Lens World with special education and those considerations for students with disabilities and how we provide that instruction during remote times. So that's a piece of it as well. And then for districts that receive foundation aid, we really had to think about the number of estimated hours of instructional time we would intend to use remotely for state aid purposes, because of course those requirements do not go away in the event, again, the public health emergency is called. We're still need to meet the 990 hours of instruction for elementary and 900 for our secondary level, even now if another public health emergency is called and we need to go into remote instruction. Any questions on that aspect? Because that was the major change.
So, I mean, I would think it's obvious that a lot of that is coming out of what we experienced through the pandemic. The sudden need to pivot to a remote learning ecosystem. And that gets applied to the snow day pilot and then the emergency remote instruction plan. So, back in the day when this was all new, there seemed to be a lot of tripping and fumbling with getting staff and students on board technologically, with software, with hardware. What have we done to improve our ability to respond due to a snow day or emergency condition where an announcement needs to be made? I would imagine you would make that call.
I do, and we ask, what's the word? We look ahead. What's the word for that? It's a
Plan?
Well, it's planned. Well, we look ahead, and we're always on top of the weather, of course. But I mean, we're looking ahead. We're already planning to have our students have their computers with them. They take them in certain grade levels, take them home every night anyway. And we've made decisions for our little people not to do that. But you know, we have plans in place for paper packets for certain periods of time, because you know, you talked about what's appropriate for little people. It is not necessarily appropriate for a kindergarten student to be in front of a computer with a parent. So we have other plans for that. I think the principals are on top of that. I don't know if you have any other comments, but you cover that with your faculty and staff. You decide on the lessons. You dictate pretty much how much time is going to be spent in actual instruction, face-to-face time. We have a plan. This is just what we submit to the state, but we will have a more robust plan that you don't necessarily see being submitted to the state.
And then the thing that they don't, as Dr. Cranshaw mentioned, so
We
they
meet about it.
They have this requirement under emergency response planning, But then, districts have to consider sort of operationalizing this fully, which we've done over the last couple of years. So certainly it can inform how we move forward. I think we've had the ability of over 2 years being in that situation, and we do plan. But there's other considerations that we would also have to work with our union leaders on. What does that school day look like in terms of the teacher's day in that remote instruction? And those are conversations that we're going to need to have.
Our plan is
With them as well.
to do some of that negotiation in the coming months with the JTs. What does instruction look like? Because they do have a lot to say about it.
Sure. Well,
I have to say, one of the things in some of the funding sources that we received over COVID, it was before Austin's time, and I don't know if Austin likes this now, but the abundance of Chromebooks that we have. And so we're really revisiting our long-range replacement plan because now all these devices come to end of life at the same time. But right now we are truly a one-to-one system. I know at Pleasant Avenue, those Chromebooks stay in school. But the good news is we're well-resourced to be able to move to remote instruction. And I think with the structure that we've set up during Austin's time, who works very closely with our technology integration coaches, that we're thankful the board continues to approve. So we're able to do a lot of professional learning with them and just direct on different applications in the district. So I think all of the things we automatically do prepare us in the event that we truly have to go into maybe a longer duration again, remote learning environment.
So what happens if, snow day pilot is called, and kids have to log on? Kid tries to log on and computer doesn't work, can't log on. How does that get managed? I mean, does a kid get marked absent? That doesn't seem quite right. How would that be managed? If you don't have an answer now, that's fine. But
it's definitely a good question. I don't know if I can answer it exactly tonight, but I think those are things that we think about. I don't know if any of the principals want to chime in on that. We have not yet used a snow day for instruction, and I don't know if we ever will. But if we were to do that and a student couldn't participate, that's an equity issue. We'll do whatever we can. We'll be on the phone with them. We will drive to their house. We'll bring a computer. We will make sure they have a hotspot. We will go to whatever ends we need to go to make sure they have what they need.
And the piece why, we need time, I think, beyond meeting this requirement to sort of elaborate on that plan is that, we were in reactive, true emergency mode over the last couple of years, with a very short amount of time initially to really roll into this model. But some of the language, when you think about the state is really pushing us to stay in that live remote learning environment. And so there's other considerations that we do not have any more details from the state. So, are we allowed to bring, depending on public health emergency, is there a time we can still bring in students with some CDC guidelines in public health or not, depending on the emergency? So it's one thing, and it's not that we're not supportive of that. We know that synchronous learning and interaction with the teacher is important, but the state's very focused on that in an emergency situation. But I'm going to say that our plan also has to be somewhat fluid too, because it's going to depend on the emergency and what public health and CDC allow us to do with our students.
And that planning will be really done with Nicole Panton, principals, transportation, and me, as the instructional side of the house. And I have to tell you, there are going to be kids, if we run into this problem, that will not receive instruction, either because they have a long driveway and we can't get to them, or we can't get our transportation out, or, it could be a number of things. There is going to be an equity. We just have to ensure that we have a plan in place to make it happen if we can.
Just to go off of the questions in regards to snow day. So it sounds to me like you have a line of where you decide whether or not it would be a remote snow day or just a what we called back in the day, just a snow day. But it sounds to me like you probably are going to have that remote learning as few and far between, right?
It's just my philosophy, and I think it's appreciated right now that a snow day is a snow day. Unless,
look forward to it.
unless
I was going to
we've already got the snow day.
into a remote
The snow days built in.
Right,
Plus,
exactly.
the instruction's not as good, it's not as robust, for being honest.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, if we really needed it, we could always
And
have
it's
it.
few and far between for the most part.
Yeah.
I do have a few other questions though too. In regards to the new laws, so do you have a time frame that they have to be implemented, or I know that you were saying that there was a couple that you were working on, or where do you stand on
Yep,
being compliant with?
as part of last year's plan, Alyssa's, Carrie's, and Ray bonds were in effect. And so with our Smart Schools Bond Act, we've already had some panic alarms before they came out with Alyssa's law for districts just to consider. It's not mandatory, but you have to consider them in your emergency response. And so as we're upgrading camera systems and access, panic alarms and how we respond have already been included in that, so we've been right on top of that. In 911, we've done a lot of work with our regional information center in terms of what our phone system needs to look like and what capabilities there are. So that's something even a year and a half ago we were working on with our NERIC to make sure that we can call 911 and all of that. So we're fully operational.
Well, we've
Most of the
had
time.
issues with what's called the VoIP system in Austin knows
Yeah.
all too well. It can be very frustrating. And we don't direct that, our NARIC does. And so I think we finally got it to a better place, right?
It's an emergency
Yeah, we
response.
completely redone our phone.
But that particular service with NARIC is not their strongest service, so we have to keep on top of them.
Okay.
We do, yeah.
And
And
then,
we were able to test and work on that. And then with the moves too, that's something that we want to make sure that we're fully set for school opening too.
and we're a little limited really in the rate, the last one, rerun. That's kind of more the geographic information, that's more like on the provider now.
It really is, yeah, it really is on the other end of it. Any other questions on that?
See, we mentioned tap app a little later, right?
So one of the lessons, just to kind of keep in mind some of the things we're doing. So we've added a school resource officer for this school year under a one-year agreement with the city and the Johnstown Police Department. Also, Dr. Crankshaw and myself this year, they established a Fulton County emergency team. And that's really comprised of regional superintendents, law enforcement, safety professionals, and HFM BOCES personnel. We do meet once a month, and we're really looking at emergency response and all things safety for more of a region-wide approach and how we can synchronize our efforts when appropriate when it comes to that. We're also, as I mentioned, are building security systems, and that's really involved with using the remainder of our Smart Schools bonds money. We've already had a single point of entry for visitors. This year we did implement the Raptor Visitor Management System, which screens all visitors to our buildings.
How does it screen?
So the first time someone comes in, they show their driver's license, and we're able to swipe it through a system. And what it does is it checks the New York State sex offender registry, and then we can save that information in there if we choose. And then if they visit each time, they can just show their license, and we can pull up their picture and their name and see that they're clear. And then it prints out a badge that they wear while they're visitors, and they're able to go into the building. So the way that we've set up this system is that if they're coming in and they're not going beyond the main office and say they're dropping something off and they're heading right back out, we don't require them to be screened. It's when they're physically going inside the school.
Does it do anything else besides the,
There's going to be some future ones, and what we can eventually do. We started with just the screening, and so that what helps us too is as our school secretaries greet visitors to the building, they can look up in the system to see their name, their information, and if they've been previously screened. There are future capabilities that we'll look at where it can link more closely to our student management system school tool. It does have features that we could consider in terms of custody orders. Sometimes things are red flagged on certain accounts depending on the family dynamics.
Does it check
custody agreements.
any other list besides the sexual offender list? Known felons,
Does
that
that
sort of
stand?
stuff?
Well, just for clarification purposes, it checks all 50 states sex offender lists. It doesn't check just New
Thank you.
York State.
But no, really, so that's something that as we get used to this piece and get our visitors kind of used to that process, we could talk as a team if it's something we want to look at, expanding its use. And quite honestly, in our principles, sometimes when we're dealing with custody agreements, it may be beneficial to look at that other feature in terms of any red flags that may pop up from a custody arrangement, but that's something that we would have to take a look at. There's always these nice applications that we're better off rolling out sometimes slowly and seeing how it works before we kind of expand upon it. I mean, you'll see we've also upgraded our interior and exterior cameras. We're also looking at what's called the blue light lockdown system on the buildings. So on the outside of the buildings, if a lockdown falls, there's a blue light that goes and it lets anybody that may be approaching our building know that we've gone into lockdown. So that'll be tied and programmed right into our emergency system. We've had door access controls. We do use identification badges. Dave's office and hopefully his new assistant, they maintain our protocols for the levels of access that staff have on the badges to our buildings. And then we use Parent Square for emergency notifications. The one thing that, we actually just went to a meeting the other day, we are looking at a mobile alert communications system. It's called the TAP app. Our region has gone with that, and what it does is, there's many features of it, but in a nutshell, it does have an emergency response alert system where there's certain access of administrators that if we had to call any type of shelter in place, a hold in place, lockdown, lockout, we could use this app to call it, and any staff member that voluntarily had it on their personal cellular device would be notified that the school was going to a lockdown.
What does TAP stand for?
It's do you know what it is? I think they just call it TAP app.
I believe,
Is it
I don't think it's an
telecommunications?
acronym for
Oh,
it.
no, it's the app.
Yeah, it's literally.
Yeah, it's like tap your app.
Okay.
And so we're looking at it right now and we have to have more training and discussions as a team about its full use, but you can have your emergency, our building emergency plans in there, so an administrator can just pull it up on their device. You can maintain a lot of your safety drills. It also, putting our plans in there and our drills in there, it makes it a little more digital to use, but it also ensures that we're compliant with the regulations that we have to follow. And then other pieces that we may consider down the road, it does have sort of a threat assessment aspect to it, but that would require some more conversation with our SEAL team. So right now, we're just looking at the mobile alert ability of it as an enhancement to our existing system. The piece that I'm most interested in is if we're really going to take a regional approach to safety and synchronize our efforts. This TAP app does allow us to set up different groups that a superintendent could have a group saying, this is going on in my district right now, I just want to let you know, and it can be delivered through this TAP app. So I'm kind of first interested in it on the region-wide approach of having an awareness with our fellow districts or law enforcement that something may be going on in our community. So more to follow on that. We're on the early stages of that. We just attended a training the other day, so we'll find out more as we move on. Any questions? That is all I have. So that is it. That's our annual district safety plan. Thank you.
All right, moving on, we've got the an executive session subject to board approval for the discussion of the employment history of a particular person. Or persons. Looking for a motion to go into executive session. Art, second. Joelle? All those in favor? Okay.
Could we also add discussing proposed pending current litigation? I just have one update.
Sure.
Did I have to re-motion?
Just to be on the safe side, sure.
Should have been quicker on
Yeah,
that.
I'll second again.
We're all in favor of it.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Okay.
I'm going to just move to the small cafeteria.
Yeah, sure. 7:09. We'll move on to the reports and kick off with the superintendent's report.
Yep, just code of conduct revisions. You're going to look. You're looking at first reading renewal every year required of the code of conduct policy by the Board of Education. I'll talk a little bit about more about that if you want me to. But right now, code of conduct revisions. Spent some time as a cabinet on those. We will submit the 23-24 code of conduct for adoption by the board at September meeting, and we can entertain questions at that time. And you'll have, I think, by that. Lorena, will that be the second reading, or is that in October of that policy?
I don't think you have to be,
Not
the
skipping a
policy or
month.
the code of conduct itself, because they're two different things.
Right, the policy.
So the policy is first reading in September, and you can have the first reading and then the second reading adoption in October, or you can do a first reading and wait for the second reading and adoption. If you want to line up to.
Well, I asked that question because our code of conduct needs quite a bit of revision, and we need to do it in such a way, I think, that is a shared decision-making type stakeholder involvement way. We haven't, Scott would remind us when we did the last major revision of this.
Major was 15.
Because if we charge the SDM process with reviewing in good detail this document, we have some significant updates. For example, developmentally appropriate codes of conduct for elementary, middle, and high school now, language that reflects our responsibility to move forward to a more constructive plan of expectations, responsibilities, and around social justice, New York State Ed, the law, and what research says about acceptable practices in schools as far as discipline goes. The old days of penal law, these harsh consequences that don't work, frankly, in a lot of cases, is not supported by hardly anyone anymore. So we have to rethink that. And stakeholders, they have to weigh in on the code of conduct on what happens with transportation, special education, technology, athletics, extracurriculars. It's a really robust code of conduct, and I don't want to undersell that because our kids' engagement depends on it. And I think our teachers' understanding of what they can do, to basically that code of conduct is supposed to keep our environment one that kids feel comfortable, capable of learning in, and our teachers feel able to teach them. So with your understanding, I'd like to put the old code of conduct in front of the board, because there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that we'd really like to change the direction of it. Kind of spend this whole next year with an ad hoc committee, kind of an SDM process to get the better policy ready for the coming year. I want you to know that we're working on signage. I have a signage plan with priorities, and we're starting to make sure all the school buildings are properly signed. Barney Signs are working on that. I don't know if you have any questions on the signage. Okay. We've got a plan in place. I'd be happy to share that with you. And just a couple things on special ed. Just please be aware that we have quite a few outside placements for 32 students. We're still missing placements on 5 students, pretty significant, because we have an obligation to educate them all, but we just don't have places for them right now. We have new students coming in every day, and we realize placements will be required for them too, so I'll keep you posted on those, because that's a big responsibility. Curriculum instruction, we're moving forward with our letters, science of reading training for Pleasant Ave and Warren Street. We have that continued partnership with Reading League, implementing many of those key ideas and practices. We're keeping that going between grades 2 through 9. We have administrative walkthroughs coming up for our administrators to give them more knowledge of what to look for when they're evaluating their teachers. We have some new assessments in science for grades 5 and 8 coming up this year. As far as the arts go, we're working on a pathway, an arts pathway for music specifically, so that they have some options rather than fulfilling all their requirements through the Regents assessments. They can have some other opportunities through what interests them and what they're good at to get to graduation. We're doing a lot of work with SPAC, Kroger Arts Collective, along the way, so stay tuned for those exciting things. We've got a couple grants going on. One of them is called New York State Ed Building Stronger Connections Grant. That's going to give us some mental health supports. Mitigating Trauma in Our Schools Grant, which you'll probably hear the word mindfulness quite a bit coming up. So we are working on some really exciting things in terms of grants. And as far as the beginning of the year, I'd like the board to know that mailings to all staff go out tomorrow for the agendas and welcome back letters, school information from each school. I think they go out next week. And we've been working on uniformity with a new staff orientation coming up at the end of August. We have 2 JTA work days, the 29th and 30th of August. We have a keynote from Brandon Beck. Pretty exciting stuff. We have lots of trainings planned, required, mostly. And Superintendent's Conference Day, where Dave is going to speak on September 5th. We have some welcomes there, mandatory trainings, again, first student day is September 5th. Goals and objectives, I hope you've had a chance to kind of look over those again. We have those to consider tonight.
No, first student day is September 5th?
6th, sorry.
Okay, we wrote September 5th. There we go, all right. It's gonna be hard to do a Superintendent's Day and start kids in school.
We could do it. But the cabinet is working on objectives to meet those goals. We kind of went through those goals today. We talked a little bit about expectations for those objectives. And then, you know, I'd like to take some time in October to share the comprehensive instructional plan with you, because there's some really good work done there. I want to remind the board that we do have a cohesive plan for improvement that we've been working on. It seems to be working pretty well so far. Instructional reporting, I'm not going to worry about that right now. Hiring, we're nearly 100% hired. We're very fortunate. I can't say that from any other districts. Kudos to that team behind you, because we've done a lot of good work and we have not just acceptable staff, I think we have some incredible staff, some really, really solid folks joining us. We need a second grade teacher though, that one just left, so stay tuned for appointments. So we'll not go to do that. And quickly on technology, we spent the summer, preparing and installing technology equipment, copiers. We have new, what are called ViewSonic boards. They're all installed at Knox. That's our new instructional tool. We've heard of Promethean technology, where teachers have interactive display boards. Well, Austin, I think in his wisdom, he's been taking a look at this new technology, which is a lot more relevant, a lot less expensive, and I think it looks good to me.
More functionality.
More functionality, easier to use as well.
Yeah.
The district's new phone directory, if you call the district, that should be up and running for all the district offices and buildings. I'm going to skip the e-hall pass system, but maybe for another time, that's a good idea. Transportation report, Julia's here behind you too. She's been working really hard implementing training and utilization of a new software called BusRite this summer. She's crafted routes. I think you said they're done.
They are, we're just working on minor details.
Yeah. And that's important for the board to know, because in case you get phone calls and complaints. But we've got about 4 families a day still calling in saying, I need a bus, and that kind of throws things into a tailspin. Because we've got routes right now all set. We've got 10 buses or 10 bus routes, right? And they're still going to be lengthy, but it's primarily because we're trying to stick to 10 bus routes. Transportation, been working with the principals and the athletic director on those routes and what we need for special education. We've got a problem with, not necessarily a problem, but I think we'll have it figured out, bringing 7th and 8th graders together for athletics, modified athletics. They're thinking about all those things. We have high quality cameras on all the buses, assigned seating, and there will be aides on buses. So that was assured to us by BOCES. Communication with families has been strong, thanks to Julia. I think it's a major focus of us to strengthen those relationships. And I think communication is going home to our families on Monday.
Correct.
Is it Monday? Yeah. Bus assignment letters, that sort of thing. So if you hear of anything, just know that it's coming. And finally, facilities planning report. We've been busy, obviously, with moving grade levels. Kudos to Mr. Wood, his staff, setting up spaces ready to be open. Had a staff meeting today, Mr. Wood. I guess that went really, really well. Great opportunity for him to establish expectations, kind of get a pulse on his staff, offer praise for the hard work they've done, and perform to get ourselves ready for the new school year. They also received some annual safety training today, and I guess the student workers went well this summer as well. I think that's where I'll end my report, but there's a lot there, and if you have any questions, I can certainly entertain those.
You talked about some transportation. I know this is the first year that the seventh graders are gonna be over at Knox. So is there transportation for them for after school if they have to get up here for a
Yes.
team?
Yes, yeah.
So
So,
looking at a shuttle system, so we do have, because we have sports, and that's something that Mr. Kramer, Mr. Van Elstrand, and Mr. Scott Hale are looking at, because depending on the practice schedules and where practices are, we are looking at shuttling students back and forth from the high school to Knox and vice versa, so we'll kind of have this loop going on after school, so it was important that we got our home to school runs done, so we can see the availability and the times for what we call sport shuttles, as well as after-school activities. We also have a late run, so we're also looking at after-school programming and those students that might need to take a later bus home. So that's something we're working on as well. So thanks to Julia once again for her work.
anything you need to add to that, Julie?
No, I think that covers everything for now.
Thank you. That's a good question. Thank you.
Okay, I don't believe we have any representatives from employee leadership organizations, and I do not have a board report to offer. You have a committee report for the facilities committee that happened earlier this week on the 15th. So this was a meeting focused on our upcoming medium capital project and energy performance contract. So with regard to the medium capital project, the current estimated costs are exceeding our project budget by about $4.2 million. We are exploring ways to reduce those costs, primarily by developing alternatives to reduce costs, alternates, bid alternates, that kind of thing, and finding ways to sort of purge some of the scope to get it to fit within budget. Some other tools that could be employed in this preliminary stage of development is tinkering with the contingency percentages and escalation assumptions, but the team isn't quite ready to go that far just to make the numbers work. We really want to focus on scope management more than numbers manipulation. Discussion is happening regarding the Performing Arts Center theater lighting system to really kind of tighten up that scope and validate costs. The expense is considerable for the size of the venue that we have. Also evaluating kitchen design refinements to reduce costs for the project and complete renovations under a future project. I think that had to do with Warren Street and Pleasant Ave. And currently evaluating the parking and bus loop solutions at Warren Street, again, to reduce costs. Really focusing on some higher saturated cost scope items to try to get that number down. A lot of the low priority items have already been identified for removal from the scope, and that should also help contribute to keeping things within budget. We did review the timeline for the upcoming potential solar project. This is being done through Renova Solar. National Grid requires an interconnection application. That process has been slightly delayed, but we are anticipating that the submission should be in by the end of August. And we're expecting more info on the project scope to be available by October once National Grid has had an opportunity to evaluate the application. And Energy ESCO.
Energy performance.
That's the EPC. ESCO is.
ESCO is the energy services company
Company.
that
All right.
leads that.
That's Danforth. Okay. So, well, in this case, we're using Danforth for our existing EPC. However, with the solar project, an energy services company and ESCO will be required to create an EPC to run parallel with the solar project. Planning a project referendum in around December 2023. And planning is really about also including any potential solar array to provide energy for an electric bus mandate that might be coming down the pipe. There's still a lot of variation on what's being required by the state at this time. In terms of the timeline for the medium and EPC projects, DD's design development is basically done. CDs, I believe, are scheduled for completion at the end of September, with an SED submission in October. SED approval should be received by end of February 2024, with a contract award by March of 2024, and construction start by beginning of May 2024, with construction completion and SED closeout by December of 2025. Next meeting will be Tuesday, September 12th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. And that's it. Any questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. We have no correspondence to review, so we move on to the consent agenda. In an effort to expedite the business of the Board of Education, but in no way meant to diminish the importance of each item, the consent agenda may be used for the items in this section. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any one board member. Items not removed will be adopted by general consent without debate. Any removed items may be taken up either immediately after the consent agenda or placed later on the agenda at the discretion of the board. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the following items as a consent agenda. This would be section 4, items A1 and 2, items B, and item C. Yes? You want to make a motion?
Wait.
Okay. All right. Second? Joelle? Okay. Does anybody wish to remove any item? Okay, any discussion?
Just concerning the coaches. Who's going through and evaluating these coaches and their performances?
Mr. Van Ostrand. And I look at all the evaluations as well. We have a prescribed evaluation tool, which was negotiated. So if you have any comments, I don't know.
Not at this point.
Not at this point, okay. There's always a question though, you know. But they are all evaluated, and if there are less than satisfactory evaluations, you know, they're noted as well.
Okay.
It's not too many years in a row though.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, discussion? No? Okay, all those in favor of the consent agenda, please raise your hand. Okay, unanimous. All right. Moving on to action items business. This would be first one would be the second reading and adoption of new or revised policies. In this case, this would be a motion to accept the recommendation of the superintendent to adopt new policy 5322 regarding district credit card use, effective as of August 17th, 2023. Make a motion. Joelle? Second? Art? Any discussion? Questions? Something we've been talking about for some time to establish. Okay, all those in favor? Thank you. School tax rates for 2023-24. I am looking for a motion and a second to accept the recommendation of the superintendent to approve the levy of taxes for the 23-24 school year in the amount of $11,764,841 and approve individual tax rates per thousand as follows. City of Gloversville, $19.36652. Johnstown, $19.71253. Town of Ephrata, $26.34426. Town of Johnstown, $29.13182. And Town of Palatine is $35.62506. Anyone wish to make a motion? Joelle, second? Art? Any discussion?
Explain again why Gloversville's a little bit cheaper.
Go ahead.
Sure, so So it really, when we do the tax rates, it's kind of this convoluted formula, but it depends on the total amount of their assessed value, and the equalization rate that's used to apply that full value. And so formulaically, they have two different equalization rates. Gloversville's a little bit higher, Johnstown's a little bit lower. And they're about 40 cents per thousand apiece between both cities, but they have different assessed values. So Gloversville City is at 25.736 million, and City of Johnstown's at 369,853. So a much larger assessed value than Johnstown City. But there's several factors that come into play. It really depends on how they're assessed, what the equalization rate is applied to that value to come up with a full value. And then the next step in the formula is that Johnstown, because of the formula, takes a higher proportion of our total tax levy in taxes than Gloversville does. So City of Johnstown takes about 62% of our total tax levy, and with City of Gloversville, 6.2%, and Gloversville is at about 4.2%. So City of Johnstown takes a larger proportion of our tax levy than Gloversville does as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
are we able to combine any of these into a?
Well, I was going to, you beat me to the punch. We don't have any of the staff members, well, we're not the personnel yet. So we do have a number of these items. We've had a chance to review. Does anybody object to consolidating items 2 through 8 of the business agenda? The action items? No?
Will this carry us all the way through 7, like 8, Roman numeral 8, number 7?
No, I'm thinking that this would simply be, I'm sorry, we have a duplicate number here. It should be number 3 on page 9, and it should run through item 8 on page 10 as the first consent agenda. So, Marina, remind me, when we do this kind of ad hoc like this, we have to have a motion and a second to accept it as a consent agenda, or we can just vote on it? Okay. So I'm looking for a motion for items 2 through 8 on page, 3 through 8, thank you. I'm looking for a motion for items 3 through 8 for the action items business, and a second. Ron? Second? Dale? Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. We'll do the same for action items personnel, which is section 8. This covers items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Can I get a motion? Art? Second, Joelle?
Yeah.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, unanimous. We have the opportunity to do some board discussion, if you so choose, with regard to the following policies. This would be 3410, the Code of Conduct, 5220, Investments Policy, 5410, Purchasing Policy, 8260, Title I, Parent and Family Engagement, Policy 7109, Comprehensive Attendance. Anybody have any questions, comments, discussion about any of those?
There are no recommended changes from year to year.
Okay.
Right now.
All right, moving on. We have some informational items. Our next facilities committee will be September 12th at 6:30 p.m. at the district office. Our next Audit, Budget, and Finance Committee meeting will be at 6:30 PM at the district office. Our next business meeting will be September 21st at 6:30 PM at Johnstown High School. So I'd like a motion to adjourn. Art, second? Ron? All those in favor?